Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am thrilled to introduce Dr. Howard McClamrock, who I will actually say I have known for a long time, ever since I was a medical student at the University of Richmond. Dr. McClamrock is head of the Division of Reproductive Endocrinology at the University of Maryland School of Medicine, and he is also one of the physicians on staff with Shady Fertility. Welcome to Coffee with Cade, Dr. McClamrock.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Yes, yes. So I invited him to be on camera today and to talk with us today because I just realized actually recently he knew or knows many of the people who were at the beginning of the reproductive endocrinology movement in the United States. He actually trained under Dr. Jones and at the Jones Institute in Virginia, and knows many of the people who are really leaders and pioneers in the field today. Of course, himself included amongst that group. So tell me a little bit about that experience when you decided that you wanted to do a fellowship in this new field, reproductive endocrinology. Tell me about that.
Well, the history for me goes all the way back to when I was a preclinical medical student at the University of North Carolina, and we had a very good reproductive biology course that just captured my interests. And I ultimately, my advisor there ended up being Dr. Luther Talbert, who was the head of the reproductive endocrinology division there, and one of the earliest people in the field who was grandfathered into the REI field prior to there even being board exams, and he was on one of the initial board examiners. He had some influence on me, and then I came to the University of Maryland for my residency, where I immediately connected with Dr. Ellie Adachi, who was also the division chief here, and was a renowned basic scientist in the field, internationally renowned. And he introduced me to almost all the reproductive endocrinologists in the United States, as well as in Europe. And IVF was in its infancy at that time. And we did not have an IVF program. And so and as you know, the Jones Institute was the first clinic in the US, and at that time, the largest clinic in the nation, and had the first pregnancy in the US. So Dr. Adachi trained under Dr. Jones when Dr. Jones and both Howard and Georgiana Jones, when they were at Hopkins.
Yes.
So I went to the Jones Institute to learn about IVF. I decided to do a fellowship, which we had that at the University of Maryland, and I was the fellow after I finished my residency there. And the purpose of me going there was to basically learn about IVF and come back and start a program here. So that was an incredible experience. We would have journal club at the Jones house every week. Other people that happened to be there at the time was Zev Rosenwax, who has now and for many years has been the head of the program at Cornell in New York. Suhail Mawasher, who was also very well known, was actually a fellow here in Baltimore, and then went to the Jones Institute and is now at Duke. So these were people who were incredibly knowledgeable and at the forefront of the field. I also went to many European meetings, and as a result of connections with Dr. Adachi, got to know all the Europeans. I was a friend of the people in England, where the first baby was born at Bourne Hall. So Dr. Robert Edwards was a friend of mine who was the embryologist there that contributed to the first baby in the world, Louise Brown. So it was a very exciting time, a very rapidly changing and moving field.
So tell me about the way that the field was perceived at the beginning, and contrast that to the way people look at the field of reproductive endocrinology now? Because I can imagine there were probably a fair amount of naysayers or people who had concerns. I mean, we deal with a lot of shame right now, but even as a provider, tell me a little bit about that experience.
I don't think I had a lot of personal experience with that. I know that when the Louise Brown was born, there were concerns about whether she would be normal or not. I know that in the early days in Norfolk, there was some protest and things about that, with people being concerned about it being too much of a human hand into reproduction. But by the time I got there, the babies, numerous babies had been born. The second baby in the world was born in Australia, and then numerous babies had been born in it, and they were virtually all normal. So I think that concern had drifted away. It had happened again a little bit with the advent of ICSI, intracytoplasmic sperm injection, with the idea that the natural selection process was being removed, and whether or not that would contribute to abnormalities as well. But as you know, it's widely performed throughout the world now. Every controversial advancement in the field is sometimes viewed in that way. I mean, now we can test chromosomes of the embryos, find out if they're normal or not. We can test for genetic diseases. And in the UK, they have made it possible to treat mitochondrial diseases
Yes.
by
Controversial.
transferring the nucleus, and that is still illegal in the United States. So it's another area of controversy, but it's a great advancement for those patients. But unfortunately, there are only quite a few of the people who need that. So genetic things in the field continue to advance at a very, very rapid pace, and it's still an ever-changing field, although not quite as rapid as it was in the early days.
I think your colleague Jason Bromer has said that the amount of progress initially that was made over decades at this point is made over months to a year. So I think we're really at a point of great discovery and opportunity. So tell me, and we didn't talk about this ahead of time, but you've been here almost since the beginning. We'll call you a settler, not a pioneer, but we'll call you a settler, one of the first group of settlers. And I know that the field has evolved so much since you've been practicing. Tell me, where do you think this is going in the future? What opportunities will exist that did not exist 20 years ago?
Well, I think the major focus now is genetics, and I think that will continue to be a big thing for the next foreseeable future as we hone in all the many things that can be done with genetics. And actually, society will need to come to some agreement on what is acceptable and what is not acceptable. I think the things that are being done now are not really very controversial, but things that could be done with CRISPR and all of these things are going to be very controversial.
Before you go on, can you talk a little bit about CRISPR and what that machine does?
Well, I really don't know enough about it to talk about it. I'd rather not be specific about it. It's just a way of gene editing.
Yeah. I'm sorry, but go ahead.
No, that's really all I wanted to say on that. I mean, there will probably be other innovative areas too, but most of it at the moment is genetically focused.
So with the term that I've heard in the past, designer babies, you feel like we're at the age of the designer baby almost right now, where people can decide, and I know it would be an ethical issue should you decide, but I'm saying where people could decide characteristics about the child.
Well, the technology will likely become available. Now, whether or not it will be acceptable to society or not, I think remains to be seen. I think there are I think the resistance to that will be probably stronger than any of the previous resistance issues that we've seen.
Mhm.
So it'll be something that will have to be sorted out carefully with ethics.
Yes, yes. Yeah. And you know, that actually kind of makes me think about the whole Henrietta Lacks case that most of the people watching this hopefully are aware of. And because of that, and some other cases that took place in medicine, ethics is a new field. It's a relatively new field. It's a field that did not exist prior to these cases that involved people not being informed about how their medical information was going to be used. So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's another thing that, is out there. Everyone has access to everything on their medical record now immediately, and so that's a good thing. And but the whole designer baby thing, and I mean the people who are opposed to that, feel that it is reminiscent of eugenics, as you know. And I mean, I think that is what that is going to face, and that is going to be a much more robust uh, concerns.
And just for the purposes of those watching who are not aware about eugenics, could you give a very brief overview of that? If not, I can flash a definition on top of the screen.
Well, you can put it up there, but I mean, it's just in the early years where it was a form of basically breeding to define certain traits and eliminate others.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And often that involved race. Mm-hmm, yeah.
Right.
Okay. So, well, this is supposed to be a quick bite that people are enjoying during lunch or during their break in the middle of the day. So I really appreciate you taking the time. Dr. McClamrock, do you have any parting thoughts about this topic on the history and the future of the field of reproductive endocrinology?
Well, just to say that, I've been here on this wild ride for a long time, and it's certainly been very rewarding, and it couldn't have been a more exciting place to be, and it still is. And I have a lot to be thankful for, to have been given the opportunity to be a part of it.
Awesome. Thank you so very much. And for those of you who are watching, we'll see you next time on Coffee with Cade.